Thank you again for taking time on a Wednesday. I always forget what day of the week it is now. They all kind of blend together. We're really excited to bring our newest edition of Corsair Chats. We have an amazing speaker who's going to talk about an extremely important topic to UMass Dartmouth and really the entire world. So we're very excited to bring this here. Just a couple brief little things before we start. If you do have any questions, you don't have to wait till the end. You're more than welcome to use the Q&A tab. We're going to answer all the questions at the end of the presentation, but just so you don't forget, you're more than welcome to leave them there, and we'll get as many questions answered as we have time for at the end. I want to introduce our speaker today. He is great. I had the opportunity to hear him speak, I think a little over a year ago now, when he trained our student ambassadors, and I was explaining to Jamie how embarrassed I was that I didn't know all the good things that we're doing at UMass Dartmouth to really make an impact on the environment and the entire world. So it's my pleasure to introduce Jamie Jacquart. Hopefully I said that correctly. We had a little pre-run in the beginning. I've always known him as Jamie. He's the Assistant Director of Campus Sustainability and Residential Initiatives. Jamie's office has made significant progress in campus sustainability by decreasing UMass Dartmouth's carbon footprint. A lot of people might not know this, but UMass Dartmouth has been recognized by Princeton Review 9 years running as one of 421 green schools in the country. So this is something that I'm extremely proud of, and hopefully we all will be as we start to learn this facts. And without further ado, Jamie, thank you for being here. I will pass it over to you.
Awesome. Josh, thanks so much. I really appreciate the opportunity that you're giving me to be here with everybody and to join and talk about this issue. Can you see my screen okay? Is that working?
Absolutely perfect.
Excellent. All right. So I've got a couple of slides for you. We're going to do a little bit of background on sort of climate change, and then we're going to talk a little bit more about the university's energy master plan that we're currently in the middle of, and how that's really going to transform us away from using fossil fuels and into being carbon neutral entirely for our Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions. So if I use the right keyboard, that's helpful. So just a quick reminder, the whole challenge that we're facing right now as an entire planet is that we're just emitting too much carbon dioxide. The way we do that is not necessarily by you and I breathing or from cows burping and farting, although those things certainly do add. But it's the reality that we're burning fossil fuels. And by burning that, we're releasing the carbon dioxide and methane gas and other greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. And this is just from 1980 that we're looking at this chart. It went from underneath 350 parts per million up to now 421 parts per million this last year. So it really is on a dramatic increase. What that's meaning is that our planet is experiencing significant changes and problems. This is an example just from this last year. We see that Australia was on fire in its entirety across the entire continent. The Arctic this last summer was catching on fire, where lightning strikes were taking place. And because it was 90 degrees in the tundra up in the Yukon areas and Siberia, they were having huge forest fires, which is uncharacteristic of that area. Just as a reminder, the Amazon is still on fire as of this summer. We are burning our own tropical rainforests at an alarming rate. Those are the lungs of our planet. And if you know anything about our current pandemic, the lungs of an organism are not the place that you want to be able to attack and compromise because it affects everything else that goes on around us. The American West is on fire. It is still on fire. I think that includes Colorado, as we're seeing those flames now engulfing additional new areas. And hurricanes, which continue to be a challenge for us. We're on Greek alphabet letter Zeta, as the next hurricane is making set to hit landfall here in Louisiana within the next 24 hours. So we're seeing more frequent storms, we're seeing larger storms, we're seeing more energy in the water because there's more heat. Again, greenhouse gases help trap heat, and that gets put into the water as well as into the air. And so what we're experiencing is more intense storms. My daughter and I were just talking this morning about the fact that she saw a study saying that New England has not been hit by a Category 3 storm in the recent past, and that we're destined for that. And with the amount of additional energy that is stored in the oceans, that's likely to be scaled up to be maybe a Category 4 or potentially a Category 5, which I'm not sure that New England has ever seen a Category 5. But I can assure you that lots of very bad things will be happening to us, even in places like New Bedford that have the stormwater systems. Just recent notes about the fact that our ice sheets are collapsing. This is a large chunk that just fell off of Greenland. It's a part of a larger piece that was roughly the size of Long Island, of Manhattan, which is not, a small sort of area as well. So we're losing our glaciers. Things are drastically changing in a very, very short amount of time. So that was the appropriate way, hopefully, for me to get your attention and to let you know that there are lots and lots of problems and challenges, but we're aware of that and we're trying to actively be a part of the solution. And again, that's part of what UMass's story is. Back in about 2007, the university signed on to what was the President's Climate Commitment, which is a college and university program where university presidents, listening to our own scientists who are working on our campuses, said, hey, there's this thing, it's a problem, we need to be aware of it. So we have to get a baseline on what our contribution is, and we need to be able to cut those emissions. So we did a baseline. It was a 3-year average across 2002, 3, 4, to be able to assess the fact that on average, we're emitting about 29,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. And our goal was to reduce that by 80% by the year 2050. We had an interim goal of a 40% cut by 2020 as a way to sort of get ourselves moving on the way down to that. Again, there's about 680 schools that have signed on to that pledge, and we are one of those. So through our work in creating a climate action plan and looking at switching our fuel options, we were able to get by 2010 an 11% reduction. So we got some really big wins early on, which was wonderful. Then we did something called expanding of the library, or we built the Charlton College of Business Pavilion, or we built the new SMAST building. So we've added additional square feet under our responsibility, and all of those are emitting additional greenhouse gases. And so what we've seen is that we've slipped from that 11% savings down to about a 6% savings. So if the goal by 2050 was to get to 80%, and the reality was with doing lots of things, we've only gotten to 11, but then slipped back to 6. It's hard to get from 6 to 80 with incremental savings. That we can't do that with just making a little savings here, a little savings there. We really have to fundamentally go after the heart of the issue. We did spend about $25 million working with a company called Neutrality, where we brought in the cogeneration plant. We put in all kinds of energy savings measures. And again, the best that we were able to get to was that 11%, now down to 6. So we know that transformational change needs to take place. Our students are primarily the drivers of that. They've been influenced along with our faculty and staff around things like the Sunrise Movement and the Green New Deal that has been talked about from Ed Markey as well as AOC. And so this was a gathering of students about a year ago in September, where they demanded that the university step up and not just pledge that we're going to do an 80% reduction by 2050, but the fact is that we needed to do that at an earlier time. That we need to move by 2030 because the planet isn't waiting. We are just continuing to emit and having all these problems. So rather than waiting to be 80% by 2050, we want to be 0%, 100% savings by 2030. So what that meant was that we had to do a big energy master plan. It's a process we started last December. And as a part of doing that, one of the first things you have to do is sort of understand who you are to begin with. And so we started looking at this in terms of systems. We've got 5 large steam boilers on campus that generate either high or low pressure steam. We have individual hot water boilers in 21 of the buildings, most notably in the Cedardale residential community, but also to places like the Charlton College of Business. So we're using building level hot water systems for that. In some cases, we're using electricity to chill our water in the summertime to be able to get air conditioning. In some cases, we're using steam absorption chillers. It's been explained to me at least 3 times how you use steam to generate air conditioning. I still don't quite get it, but just let's say there's a difference in temperature, and rather than putting the energy in, putting the heat in, they take the heat out. It's a way to do that. But we utilize that. So we run our steam plant on a year-round basis. And again, high pressure steam is expensive to operate and has lots of leaks. And again, you're taking temperature, like room temperature water at 50 degrees and heating it up to 325 degrees in a super pressurized system to make it into high pressure steam. So that's a big change in temperature, and that takes a lot of fuel to be able to do that. In addition to that, obviously we buy electricity. We generate some of our own electricity through our gas turbine on campus. So we're co-generating, we're generating steam that then spins a turbine and makes electricity for us. In addition to that, we're also running that through several other sorts of burners to be able to, in how we use our gas to generate our heat. So that's kind of an overall assessment of kind of what is. We also looked at our heating load a little bit more granular level. So it's not just that we're providing the same level of heat all of the time. We provide more heat or less heat depending on the temperature outside, the type of equipment that we're running, whether it's air conditioning or heatings, and how long we have to run those pieces of equipment. So this was kind of the old way of looking at it. We just kind of we provided heat and things were like either on or off. And what we found through this whole process is that there's really 3 different parts of this that we could identify in ways to solve those with different pieces of technology. So for instance, in the new scenario, there's kind of this base load that exists. We're heating and cooling pieces of campus kind of at all times. Think about the fact that in the summertime, we're certainly cooling lots of areas. We're probably not heating that many of them, but in the wintertime or in the mid-seasons, we're actually air conditioning some of our server rooms or our computer rooms because they need to stay cool, and then we're heating other spaces. Or maybe we're heating and cooling a space at the same time because somebody forgot to turn a duct off, or we just neglected to alter the systems. So we're both heating and cooling. And so that is specific technologies that do really a great job of doing that at the same time. So if you have a hot water loop around the campus and a cold water loop around the campus, and they return that back to something called a heat recovery chiller, they can sort of exchange that temperature. They borrowed it from one thing, they're giving it back to the other. We don't have to generate anything. We just have to pump the water around, and we'll be able to do that. We do have on plans the idea of having geothermal heat pumps so that we could store some of that energy back in the ground or take it out of there. So that's kind of a storage plan for us. Our intermediate load would be, again, more of that geothermal thing. That's kind of like the shoulder seasons. It's the spring, it's the fall. We need a little bit more heat than normal, but it's not like full on, winter kind of a thing. And again, this represents the amount of hours necessary for us to utilize those technologies and get that additional level. And then the final piece is those really, really cold days in January or February when we're running our systems kind of at 100%. There's a specific set of technology that we can bring in for that peak load, where we probably would be using a burner of some sort, but burning biofuel as opposed to petroleum-based fuel. So that's a way to sort of look at and analyze all those different ways to sort of do that. There's a lot of different technologies that are out there that help us to sort of look at how we can provide these, to provide heat and cooling to the university. Lots of them were based in fuel. So we looked at those and said, well, it's fuel, it's going to it's going to emit carbon, so we're not going to look at those. There's a bunch of renewable fuels that we looked at, so that may become a part of the scenario. We actually had to go through and look at each one of those and kind of cost them out to see, are we actually going to see a reduction in our greenhouse gases? How does that work in terms of, like, for instance, biomass? Where are we going to buy biomass from? How does the state evaluate that based on its greenhouse gas profile? Because you need to grow the trees, cut the trees, bring the trees here, and then burn them. So it's a renewable, recyclable process, but it's not entirely greenhouse gas free, because then you have to regrow the forest. So for the first 30 years of a project, you're actually carbon negative with it. You're still emitting. And then in the last 20 years of a project, you would see some of those environmental benefits coming as that forest regrew. And so for that reason, we ruled that technology out. Some places are using it on small scale sorts of locations that aren't a part of sort of a loop system, but that wasn't necessary for our specific area. Lots of renewable options, again, similar things that you've seen: photovoltaics, wind turbines, solar thermal, was another sort of piece. We flirted for about 4 minutes with the idea of nuclear. There is nuclear, micronuclear, that's in development right now. Raytheon has been at the forefront of that. I mean, obviously they do this in submarines with small reactors. And that's maybe something that is going to be coming, it's one of those, it's 10 years away, and they've been saying that for 20 years, because it's always just kind of a little bit out there on the horizon, but it's not a commercially available product as of yet. The last category then is solely under electrification. So we're using electricity to do something for us. I think a lot of people, at least certainly in my age group, we're always told that electric heat is the most expensive heat, and it is, because at the time, the only type of electric heat was resistance heating. So basically you transfer the electricity into a heating element that is run off of that electricity, and then it releases the heat. And that it's a thin aluminum sort of product, and it doesn't hold on to the heat very well, and so it dissipates real quickly. There's a lot of new technologies that have come out in the 30 years since we had sort of one of our earlier energy crises. And these technologies have gotten really so transformed in even the last 5 years that they're looking at heat pump technology, where you're able to take an air-based system and transfer that into a water-based system. Again, we're circulating water through our buildings as opposed to just taking air to air, which maybe you would do in a home application. I did that at my house. But an air to water system is now commercially viable, but at different sort of emissions factors. So there's a lot of different systems that we sort of looked at potentially to say, how would any and all of these work? And some of this didn't pass muster. So basically what that allowed us to do is to focus in on the following types of technologies to be able to look at. So again, at some point for the peak usage, you can't beat the fact that a bio-oil boiler is something that works really, really efficiently. You burn a renewable biology-based fuel, think like vegetable oil or recaptured oil from a anaerobic digestion plant. So you can take that and you can burn it. You can start the boiler up quickly. You can use it when you need it to. You can shut it down fairly quickly. And it gives you lots of therms quickly. Photovoltaics from the renewable side, really for our campus application, is going to be the best. We did just take down the UMass wind turbine. We may look at replacing that with another one because, again, we've got a fairly good amount of wind here, and they've been developing turbines that start at a lower airspeed rather than the historically kind of like that 6 knots per second. They're down into like the 5s and maybe the high 4s. So that may be a better application for the university. But then we looked at the electrification piece. So again, there is a heat pump and air to water large scale piece, a ground sourced heat pump system, heat recovery chillers, and then conventional chillers that we're looking at to be a part of the mix for our campus. So kind of going back to that diagram piece, that's what the new world is going to look like for us. You'll notice that there are numbers of 1, 2, and 3 on here because this is a phased program that we're looking at being able to put in. It's probably going to take us about 10 to 12 years to build this out. And again, part of that is there's lots of geothermal wells that have to be dug. And do we want to say, dig up the entire campus all at the same time? Or do we want to maybe have some chaos in one area and then finish that and then have chaos in a different area as we close off things like parking lots or walking areas? This is going to be a fairly disruptive thing to the university. We have to dig up ground and put new cold and hot water pipes into the ground that are large enough to hold hot and cold water. So we'll have 4 pipes that are going in to supply and to return, 1 for hot, 1 for cold. So having that system put in is a major part of phase 1. Phase 1 will have a new boiler for us. It'll have a couple of ground sourced heat pumps and some electric chillers. And then the geothermal wells is a piece of the second part of that as we look to start to store some of that energy within the ground. It may happen that phases 1 and 2 are going to overlap fairly to be able to do that. And again, lots of electric pumps to be able to sort of move that stuff around. And again, 2 big storage tanks are going to need to come in for hot water and for cold water so that we've got sort of a reservoir. There's sort of some additional, it's like our savings account. We've got extra heat or cold available to ourselves. So in case it's maybe not as hot out today or as cold out today, and our systems aren't 100% efficient at being able to do that, there's a sort of a bank that they can draw from. It's also really helpful that if there's an energy outage of some sorts, this requires a small amount of energy to be able to just circulate either the cold or the hot to be able to keep ourselves at temperature. So it's a really great resilient effort for us as well. So spatial arrangements, just to give you a sense of kind of what and how these things would go in. The BTES is the borehole thermal energy storage systems. And we're looking at the opportunity that, where could we possibly do this? It's going to take about 25 acres of space to be able to do that. Paul Rudolph, when he designed the campus, did a great job of giving us this dedicated green field that runs from the amphitheater all the way down to Cedar Dell Pond. So we need to get a better delineation of just how close or far away from the pond. I think it's like a 50-foot sort of barrier that we have to keep in order to not impact the wetlands. But from there, how much space can we then utilize going back up? Do we want to, and this is just sort of a spacing sort of a thing to say, if we had to take up some parking lots, we may need to dig those up, put the wells in, and then put the parking lots back over the top of them. Or could we utilize, again, some of that interior space within the quad that runs, from the Campanile going kind of north towards the liberal arts building? Again, there's more dedicated space out there that is not going to be built on in the future because of Rudolph's design. So do those green spaces allow us more space to be able to do that? Further studies are needed about that. There is a net zero plant that's going to need to be built where we put all of these pumps and other kinds of things and storage tanks. The current facilities building that we have is not large enough for that. So we're going to need to sort of build that, but also in a very similar sort of location so that all of the utility lines that run there can all sort of be done contiguous with one another. So that plant is going to be located just on Ring Road, just to the south of where the existing physical plant is. So part of what I wanted today's sort of talk to center on is that we've learned all of this stuff on a larger scale on behalf of sort of the university and what we're going to be able to do. But I wanted to share some of these in terms of things that you can do to learn from that to take to your own homes, to be able to sort of implement in your own lives, and whether that's in your careers, in your jobs, or just simply in managing your own homes. There's things that we can all do to be able to reduce our carbon footprint. The first one of those is around conservation. Again, that was part of the NORESCO program that we had done. Part of that $25 million worth of work is how do we seal things up as much as possible? There's the cracks under the doors or around the windows. The caulking is sort of gone after a certain amount of time. So you have to kind of keep up with the maintenance of those kinds of things to seal your house. The Mass Save program is doing a really wonderful job right now where they're offering a free home inspection that includes free air sealing as well as free insulation. There's a lot of frees in all of those. And all of that is designed, again, as our first fuel to be able to help save energy is to just stop wasting it, right? All of us have a drafty kind of buildings that were built, not currently. And so depending on the age of the home, it may have either little to no insulation currently in it. The last house that I had built in 1933, 0 energy savings measures were ever put into that. It was all open walls. So when we put insulation into that home, it saved us about 30% on our energy bills immediately. We actually had to pay to do that because it was a value of ours to do. But right now, Mass Save is offering you that insulation for free. So I certainly encourage all of you, if you just go to masssave.com, you can sign up with them. Ductless mini splits is a great option. At my current house, our air conditioning system failed and we needed to replace that. We had some contractors come in and take a look at it, and it was going to be like $30,000 to retrofit a design to sort of support the ductwork that we had originally. And then it would be just with a conventional sort of air conditioning system. We actually had a different contractor came out and gave us a quote on mini splits. It was less than half the cost. The cost to operate it is less than a traditional air conditioning system. And in addition to offering us the air conditioning, we also have electric heat as well as dehumidification in the summertime. So we actually turn on the dry feature through most of the sort of humid but not awful days, saving the air conditioning for those sort of peak days that we have. And right now during sort of the shoulder heating seasons, we're actually using the electric heat. And again, it's a fraction of the cost of, and doesn't involve burning any fossil fuels. Air sourced heat pumps is another new technology that's come along. You can use it for heating and cooling. We're actually using it with our water heater right now. It has the added benefit that we can actually dehumidify our basement without having to have a separate dehumidifier. Again, we were spending, $60 to $80 a month during the sort of summer humid seasons to dehumidify our basement. We no longer have that expense because we're just running this the hot water heat pump to run the hot water for the house. So again, we switched off of a fuel, we went on to electricity, and we got a benefit of reducing our overall electric use. Ground sourced heat pumps are also a really great option for homes to be able to heat themselves. If you've got a backyard that has some space and you can be able to put a field out there, that's a great way to be able to get free heat from the earth. It can happen during new construction. It is also something that can be done, retrofitting that to your system right now, to your yard. So again, that's another option for people to take a look at. So that's the sort of quick overview of not only sort of what we're doing, but some things that you folks could be doing at home. And if you've got additional questions we don't get to here, there's my phone number and my email address, and we'll be happy to talk about this with anybody as we go forward. So Josh, with that, why don't we jump into some questions? And
yeah, so anyone that has any questions, you can type them out. You can use the chat or the Q&A box if you guys have any that you'd like to get out. We did have a couple that were sent in. I think you answered most of them, but it was about what action steps the UMass Dartmouth community can make in terms of current students, faculty, and staff on campus to help in this cause, to continue to be more sustainable.
Yeah, so we work currently around behavior change with people because we know that about 15% of our energy usage is actually behaviors that people who live within that community can affect. Again, when I'm home, I have the ability to turn the lights off and on at will, less so in like the hallway of your residence hall, right? They just kind of automatically are on. Maybe they'll go dim after a while if it doesn't sense any motion, but there's still some provided because fire code requires it. So you don't have control over that. But you know what you can do? You can shower for 10 minutes or less. If you bring your phone with you to the shower, listen to 2 songs and hop out. Maybe a third if you're sort of, daydreaming or whatnot. But if you're in the shower after 3 songs, you're no longer washing anything. You're just kind of like making life decisions. So that's one of the measures that we talk about with our current students. Everybody could switch over from using hot water or warm water in their washes for washing their clothes to switch over to cold. All of the laundry detergent is now cold water sensitive, and it's completely possible for you to wash your clothes. And then that way you're not having to pay to buy the water, pay to heat the water, and pay to throw the water away. You're actually just paying to buy it and throw it away, and using it for what its purpose is. So again, the heating is not a necessary function unless you have like an exorbitant amount of grass stains or something, a special treating kind of a situation. So that's certainly another behavior that we can have. The third one, and this is sort of a little thing, but let me sort of share with you the volumetric increase. When people are on campus, it's really easy to be like, oh, I'm going to the 2nd floor, but there's an elevator right in front of me. Why don't I just take the elevator and go to the 2nd floor? Well, because that uses electricity, right? And if it's you, the only one going in there to do that, how often are we moving and using these conveniences of life to move us around, when you can get a little bit of lifestyle exercise and be able to save energy in the process? So it's not just the energy of moving you, but it's also the wear and tear on the equipment. So case in point, you're going to walk into the library, and these really big doors that are 12 feet tall, and they're glass and they're heavy, and you rather than pulling on the door, you punch the little handicap assist and you let the thing magically open for you. Wow, Alibaba, open sesame, right? That's awesome, except for the fact that you've used electricity in doing that, but you're also wearing out the mechanism that goes with that thing. 12,000 people go through that door every single day. So 12,000 times a little bit of electricity and one more traveling of all of those things adds up when you do that for the number of days that we're open. So that's something to be concerned about in terms of the volume. So back to the showering example. If everybody who lives on campus showered for 1 minute less, we would fill 3 Olympic-sized swimming pools with water that we didn't have to buy, heat, and throw away. So that's a huge volume, and a little bit of change on a person's part, but a huge impact because there's so many people living on campus. The average student on campus, we've been measuring this for 8 years. I know these numbers in and out. They shower for an average of 10 minutes. That's the average student. There's about 15 to 20% of our students that are showering for more than 20 minutes because I don't really know what's going on in there, but they're not cleaning themselves any longer. They've had a really long, hard day since the last time they took a shower. And again, because our students take an average of 7.3 showers a week. Again, they go to the gym, they're working out, that kind of stuff. It's kind of average what they're doing. So 1 minute less of a shower, huge impact.
Incredible. That is amazing. One of the questions is, has the university allocated funding for this to work, and how much would all of it cost, essentially, the plan that you were showing?
So this is a major capital project. It is going to require a significant investment. And we are working with partners at the Department of Energy Management, or DOER, along with DCAM, the UMass Building Authority, ultimately the legislature. We are one of 4 campuses in the UMass system that are doing these energy master plans. Again, the governor has said we want to be, through the Global Warming Solutions Act, we want to be at carbon neutrality by 2050. That they are, we used to be an 80% cut, now it's 100% cut by 2050. That's great. Our state is leading on that issue. So several of us have taken the step forward. Us, UMass Amherst, UMass Lowell, and Salem State University. We're all doing energy master plans. 4 different, I see 3 different companies are involved in doing them. And each one has different opportunities. You saw our list of things. Maybe at Amherst, they have the opportunity to recapture some heat from the wastewater that they have, because they have their own wastewater processing plant for not only the university, but the entire town of Amherst on their campus. So there's waste heat available that they have to dissipate anyway. Why not pull that into their energy system? So there's a certain amount that they're going to be able to recapture. If we ever redo our energy systems at SMAST East, the main sewer pipe for the city of New Bedford runs 50 feet from that building. So there's a huge opportunity for them to be able to capture some of that waste heat. So again, there's different opportunities that each one will have. We're hoping to learn collectively about what all those opportunities are, and then go back to, again, the legislature, DCAM, to be able to sort of set the priorities to say, you've asked us to do this work, we're showing you how, now help us partner to figure out how to pay for that. And again, most of these things aren't going to be done as a one decision, do the entire plan. It'll be phased over a period of time as we implement, let's dig up the ground and do the cold water and the hot water loops. We can use existing technology to sort of support some of those things. Then we're going to put the boreholes in, and then that's going to sort of switch some systems over. And then at some point, we'll have to switch out the steam distribution to go entirely to the hot water piece. So it's kind of rolled out over time. The expense for this, hold on to your hats. We just figured this out the other day. It's somewhere between, if we decided to do all phases at the same time, it'd be like $86 million. If you look at that phased over the 3 phases over what is likely to be a 15-year build out, it'll be like 131 million. So again, not small. That's the size of our plan. The UMass Amherst plan starts at 500 million and goes up from there with the cost escalation done over time. So again, maybe we have the benefit if we go to the legislature and say, we'd both like to do these projects. Ours is only 86, theirs is 500. So which one can we afford? I don't know. I mean, we're all partners in this. We're all learning, and the fact remains, UMass Amherst is the #1 emitter of carbon of the entire state portfolio, of all state facilities. And so, we're, I think, 17th. But again, if you look at the top 20 and try to solve all of those, Lowell's in there, Salem State is in there, we are, UMass Amherst. That's why we're the first ones out of the gate. We're the first ones learning the lessons. Hope we can apply those, and then they can start to better understand how to forecast prices, look at emerging technologies, and learn some lessons along the way. It's all about sort of becoming a learning organization that is working collaboratively. That's one of the really exciting things about this. Again, within the state, we're partnering together with these other entities to learn all this stuff.
Awesome. What are some ways alumni and donors can help in the cause? Obviously, I know, like I always said, I was ashamed of the fact that I didn't know the messaging. So I would say the first answer is to share the information. But are there any other ways that you could think of?
You know what? Let me throw the challenge back to you. If you want, obviously, if you want to send some money to the university to our sustainable efforts, we would love to be able to hire more interns, to be able to do more education on campus and do more programmatic outreach around some of these things. That's always a helpful piece. Let's utilize the power of social media. Let's be selfish for a second. Put in a system at your house of some sort, do some infrastructure upgrades, and then show us. Send us that via social media. Challenge your classmates to do the same thing, to make an impact, to make that impact both locally as well as sort of on the campus-wide level. And again, get others engaged in the work that you're doing. That's part of this whole outreach. That's why I'm doing this today, is to say that, we're trying to lead by example on how to do this stuff, and we want to bring you with us. I want to save you money. I want you to spend less on your energy and have that impact our environment less, so that the world that we both live in ourselves and that we hand to our children and our grandchildren remains livable. I'm terrified of fires coming to the Northeast. That is a reality that we may be facing in the very near future if we don't change our behaviors, and we have the ability to do that. So I would say engage around the issue, do what you can. There's free things that you can do immediately. There's some things that require a little bit more savings. But at some point, and again, I learned this in my last house, the boiler dies. And how are you going to replace it? Are you going to replace it with another fossil fuel based system? And is it going to happen this year? Is it 5 years from now? Is it 10 years from now? Is it, let's create a plan because I don't know if it's 5 or 10 years, and what happens if it's 3? Literally, I was in the middle of a changeover of my heating system, went away on a little vacation in the middle of it, and the entire system died while we were gone. Our boiler cracked open and it was done. Awesome. It worked for 66 years. That was great. We used it for every ounce of energy that it could give us. But had we not had a plan and been in the middle of that plan, I wouldn't have had heat at our house in the middle of December for, a little while. And we would have had to do the panic move, which was give me the exact same thing because I need to do that immediately. And we wouldn't have been able to make that sort of better decision and that progression. So again, being a little bit more mindful and thinking of things in advance, I think is always a great way to plan.
Perfect. Are these factors being applied to new construction in the new residence halls?
So yes, we did take that into consideration as we were looking at doing that. As you may have remembered from the first diagram, we used a lot of steam absorption chillers because we have steam and you can use that to cool a building. We didn't do that in the new residence hall. We actually went with the electrification of that. So they have electric chillers. It currently is hooked up to our steam system, but can be converted over to a hot water exchange system fairly easily. So again, that's something that we're looking to do. We did with that project. Case in point, we're also going through the science and engineering building and doing a big, deep energy retrofit with that building, changing out windows, yay, but also updating our mechanical systems. And it had an electric chiller in it that's at its end of its useful life. We need to replace it with something. And it's like, well, you want to go back, you want to switch to a steam system? We're like, no, that's going backwards technology-wise. We're going to stick with the electricity and we're going to size it appropriately with, one that's going to be of a good energy efficient quotient. Because we could, again, they come in good, better, and best. And why buy good when better is going to help us to get that much less energy usage? So it's not just the dollars to acquire something. We're looking at more life cycle cost averages. So it's the cost of acquiring it plus the cost of operating it that we're looking at in terms of making those decisions.
Perfect. This last question is really for, I guess we would say, and we were kind of talking about it earlier, about prospective students that are looking at universities and the importance of this message. If you had something that you would want to say to prospective students that were thinking about obviously coming to UMass Dartmouth, what would you say to them about the importance of this cause?
So it's something that it permeates through who we are and how we do things. And I think that matters. I think that our students care about the fact that our dining services program is giving them food that is caught locally, that it's caught responsibly, that we've got a seafood program where they're looking at introducing bycatch, so that when you go out to look for fish A and you happen to catch a couple of fish B or C, that we're actually serving fish B and C because it's got a little bit smaller market for those things. Or let's go out and catch readily available fish from the area that you may not have heard of before. So dogfish is a good example, that there's plenty of it around us and they're ugly. So most people are like, oh, it's an ugly fish, I'm throwing it back. It actually tastes delicious when you know how to cook it right. And so our chefs have been going out and figuring out how to take what looks to be ugly that turns out to be hugely flavorful when cooked in the right way. That everybody doesn't want to have just like a big white fish sandwich, that it goes into stews, it goes into, a variety of different presentations that are really delicious and wonderful. So how have we done that in dining? How are we doing that operationally? Where are we collecting our food waste and making sure that that gets turned back into food for animals, rather than just going immediately to the garbage, which is where we don't want it to be. So we're living some of those values, and just the osmosis of people living within this environment, they're able to learn some of that. There's lots of opportunities for people to study this. Certainly our engineering students learn about sustainable values, but there's also a sustainability minor. It dovetails really wonderfully with so many different other programs. For the last 3 years, I think it was the largest minor on campus. So we had more and more people that are looking at, how do I marry together business with sustainability, or art with sustainability, or civil engineering with sustainability, because that's going to help position me to look towards jobs of the future. So the whole Green New Deal is based on good green jobs that are well paying in the wind sector, in the solar sector. And those are really great paying jobs that they need people to be doing. And so those are the industries that are growing in the energy sector. Coal, not so much, it's going away. Just from a price comparison standpoint, solar is less expensive than coal-powered electricity. So people that are aware of those kinds of things are able to go into those areas.
Well said. Awesome. That's all the questions we do have. Jamie, I can't thank you enough for doing this. I think we have an opportunity to partner up on some alumni affinity groups and shared interest groups to get this message out too. So I'm excited about the future, and definitely appreciate your time and everything that you and your office are doing. These recordings are all actually going to be on the website. It does take a little bit of time to get them up, but we have all of our Corsair chats on the alumni page. You can definitely just search for Corsair chats and it'll bring you to it. And thank you again, everyone, for coming. Stay safe and do the best you can. Reduce that carbon footprint. It's amazing because I got sod put in this last summer, and I picked a sod that supposedly reduced the carbon footprint because it needs less water. So there's a lot of opportunities to do it. And I'm going to definitely go to masssave.com because I know I'm probably losing a lot of energy through my windows because I have an old house. But happy that you were able to teach me so much and appreciate you.
Thank you for all taking the time out, and whether you're watching it live or if you've seen a subsequent recording of it, we need you to be a part of the solution, and there's so many different ways to be involved. So I appreciate your efforts to do that.
Awesome. Everyone stay safe. Thanks.